Hi, everyone. My name is Franco. With Irgi today, I'm going to be moderating this panel of talking comic shop with librarians across the world, North America and Australia. I guess let's just start out with introductions. Who you are, what you do, how you became involved with comics librarianship and your respective organizations. I'm going to pass going first. So do you want to start with Matthew?
Sure. Hi, it's okay. I'm Matthew. I am a board member for the Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable of the American Library Association. I'm also a co-organizer of the Zine Pavilion at the American Library Association annual conference. We're doing something online this year since the conference is not happening. And I am a co-host of Book Club for Masochists, a reader's advisory podcast. So if you want to listen to a podcast about library stuff, you can listen to mine. We pick a different genre at random every month and talk about it. In regards to getting involved with comic stuff, I have been reading comics for my entire life, really. And the fact that when I started library school, I discovered that knowing about comics was a skill set that was desirable and not held by many people. And I was really surprised by this and shocked by this. And I'm still kind of surprised that sometimes my knowledge of old X-Men comics is somehow valuable in this field.
Definitely. Irgi, do you want to go next and introduce yourself?
Yeah, certainly. My name is Jurgi, and I work at Kingston Libraries in Victoria, Australia. And I'm also the ALIA Graphic Novels and Comics convener. I grew up in Europe reading comics. The comics culture there is pretty different, I would say. There's definitely, I've never felt that kind of stigma that I sometimes see in Australia and English-speaking countries. And my parents read lots of comics, collected comics. They lived in France for quite a few years. And comics are huge in France. So my background's in media studies and teaching. And then one day I decided to go into libraries, and then realized that graphic novels and comics. The graphic novels and comics collection at the library where I was at could be better. So I started making some suggestions, and very quickly the collections team were like, just send us your suggestions and we'll just start buying more. And because really we don't know what we're buying, or, we're kind of following the supplier's advice and things like that. So I started advising them and all that. And that's when I started to really look into it, and comics librarianship. Are there other people there who are dedicated to comics at libraries? And I discovered the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable, the Facebook group, and that was about 3 years ago. For me, that was a complete game changer, And from then on, I was like, we need to do something like this in Australia. And it took time. But I started developing a blog and talking to some people. Then I put a submission for a conference that I presented last year, NLS9, so the New Librarian Symposium. My presentation was essentially, comics are amazing and they're awesome and they're great for literacy in the 21st century. And they've got literacy superpowers, and look at what they're doing in the US. It's amazing with the roundtable. We need something like that here. Who's with me? And Sarah was there at the presentation, and maybe she can tell you. Maybe she can introduce herself now, and she can tell you how she saw that presentation from her perspective.
Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, sure. So I'm Sarah. I was an Education Services student. I volunteered at the conference as a student, and I was assigned to Yogi's room as a microphone runner. And I was happy about that because I had already marked down that I wanted to see his talk, and it really called to me, you know, his passion for comics and how he made sense of them in the library world. And it just was something that I went, yep, I'm signing on to his Facebook group when he creates it. And it was a way for me to find a niche for me in the library world. And it's led me here. And so I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. And Kristin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kristin Anderson. I am a public services librarian at Lewis University in the western suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. I got into librarianship when I was probably undergrad. I worked at our university library there, and it just kind of sucked me in. And I've been working in libraries ever since. I got my MLS about 3 or 4 years ago from University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. For graphic novels, kind of bit me really early on. At my brother's barbershop when he was little, they had all these Spider-Man comics, and when my mom would take us there, I would just like consume those so much that we went to a garage sale and I found this really old bound Women of Marvel done by Stan Lee, and it just it did everything for me. It had Medusa, it had like just all the women in Marvel, and I loved that book so much.
Awesome. And back to me, I'll introduce myself. My name's Franco Vitella. I'm an assistant branch manager with the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library in Ohio. How I got involved with comics librarianship, my first semester of library school, we were introduced to Carol Tilley's work, which was kind of really insightful for me because where I live, the public libraries, the collection in terms of graphic novels weren't always great, so I wasn't necessarily using my public libraries for it. So kind of just realizing that, oh, hey, this is a section of librarianship that I can contribute to. I had an internship during library school and kind of was tossed some collection development responsibilities there to help the collection. And that kind of just coincided with the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable coming into being. So volunteered. I think the first year I was involved as a member on the Will Eisner Grant Committee, and now co-chair the Awards and Rating List Committee with you, Kristin. And I just try to keep comics involved with my work as much as I can, finding patrons who are interested in it, in terms of what communities are there locally and readers that are interested in comics. So that's me. So our next question, I guess, gets a little bit more philosophical in terms of what comics mean for libraries and the type of library that you work in and what impact you see them having. So does anyone want to take that first? Georgi, I see you're smiling. Do you want to?
Yeah, all right. I'll take it. Yeah. Well, I think, for me, one thing that I always talk about and that I feel very passionate about, and it's probably because of my background in media studies and teaching, and that's that, in terms of literacy, comics, in my opinion, have multiple literacy superpowers. I often say that, because they're really multimodal texts, with the visual and the text and the way they interact with each other. They're really complex texts. That's a really, really valuable skill this century, 21st century literacy kind of thing. So I think that comics can really support, as we often hear, people talk a lot about reluctant readers, and yes, it can support them, but it can also support advanced readers. For me, the reluctant readers thing should be like the beginning of the sentence, then you should continue with advanced readers, because for advanced readers, the complexity of the text, they can get a lot out of it as well. So I think it's really important to promote them public libraries, promote them at school libraries, but also academic libraries. There's just so much that you can take out of it, out of them. I really like what is being done in terms of academic comics librarianship, in terms of graphic medicine as well. That's been a really interesting movement in the last few years. So I think there's a lot there. And, you know, it's, for me, I work at the public library. So at the public library, the way I see it is that it's important to cater for everyone in the community. Yeah. And that includes graphic novels, because there's a lot of people that read them, and it's another art form, it's another medium of storytelling, you know, and it's as valuable as all the others, and it covers all genres and all age brackets and all that. And actually, I would say that in the last few years, some of the most intimate, personal, diverse books that are out there are actually graphic novels. So they have a lot to offer, and I think that as librarians, we need to advocate for that, you know, because very often in the community, people are still catching up with this and still have some other ideas.
Matthew, Kristin, do you want to talk about the academic side of things?
For me, I think I usually try to push them as like something that the students can read as a diversion from their classes, as kind of a stress relief thing. Because when you're in college, you know, you're hunkering down, you have to read all these articles and books, and you kind of just want some brain candy, something fun to do for yourself. So that's how I try to push the graphic novels in our academic library.
I think there's a lot of potential for using them as a subject to study as well, though. And I think libraries are doing more to support that. You mentioned the graphic medicine, which is becoming a really big thing in a lot of medical libraries, and places are having that stuff so that people can use them in ways of understanding aspects of medicine and things like that, that you may not be able to get from reading just a textbook. And there's a lot of opportunities, I think, that we haven't embraced fully yet for supporting other types of education that are happening within academia. A really good example I like to use is a colleague of mine at a previous place of work at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, is in charge of the teaching library. And she has gotten a massive graphic novel collection there because she wants people that are going to become teachers and educators to know about graphic novels and to learn how they can use them within the classroom. You know, you can't get school teachers to use them if they haven't studied them as well, if they don't know how to use them. And so that's an example of how you can, an academic library that is having graphic novels for use somewhere else as well. And so I think there's a lot of possibility for things like that. And I think we're going to continue seeing them collections for things like history and science and everything else develop as more and more comics are created.
Yeah, I mean, kind of back to what you was saying from the public library side of things too. I mean, it's tough. I think it's still a medium that's not always taken seriously. You know, I see it especially with parents. You know, it's kids selecting graphic novels, and that's primarily the audience that we see. You know, come summer break, the collection is basically depleted in terms of what's on the shelf. So it's definitely a popular medium for kids, and it's harder, I think, on the adult side of things. You know, there are obviously adult readers, and they're certainly interested in comics. But trying to make a leap towards people who might be interested, or doing readers advisory with someone where maybe there's a graphic novel that'd be perfect for this reader, but they're not a comics reader, and they might not be interested so much. That's where I find it challenging, but where there's kind of the most room, I guess, for improvement. In terms of the public library side of things.
I found that one of the challenges for public libraries looking to grow their adult graphic novel collections is not knowing where to necessarily look for the things that they want to get, and not knowing what areas to purchase things in. Really, a lot of the time when you're seeing adult graphic novels highlighted within like mainstream media, it's for things like memoirs and stuff like that, which are great. And it's really exciting that libraries have those, but there's a whole other area of like fiction comics that are also out there. And one of the things that the Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable has created this year for the first time is the Best Graphic Novels for Adults list, kind of as a companion to the Young the Young Adult Library Services Association. Is that YALSA?
YALSA, Young Adult Library Services Association.
Okay. YALSA has had the best graphic novels for teens list for like over a decade now. And we thought, okay, there's more opportunities here to do things for adults. And hopefully next year is also the launch of the GNCRT's best graphic novels for children's list as well. So that is also coming in the future. I think they're really exciting. And I think it is going to really help highlight titles that library folks might not know about otherwise. So I'm really excited about it. The first listed nominees are up on our website right now if you want to go and take a look, which I think is exciting. And there's going to be more added to that as the rest of the year. And then the actual list will be posted in January of next year.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a great tool, especially from collection development side of things. Having done some collection development myself, primarily with teen collections, using the ALSC list or the also list that you mentioned, it's kind of a go-to at the end of the year to kind of play catch up in terms of, hey, what do we miss? And with adults, I think we tend to be apprehensive in terms of buying some things. We don't want to, there's a desire maybe not to always, worry about offending people, especially now that, there's images in the book and we certainly don't want to censor, but I think that's always in the back of mind of some librarians. Sarah, do you want to add anything to add in terms of what you see? I know you're still in library school, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on this this topic.
Well, as a patron of the library, adult section I find in the library, it was buried all the way in the back. So I definitely think it needs to be promoted more in adults. And also I'm a parent of a young child, and it never occurred to me to take her over to the junior graphic novel section and view it as something we could read together. So last year, when I was prompted by Yogi to browse that area of the library more, I found some great titles for her that were a bit above a picture book, a proper book, and there was some great Australian titles in there, which for us it's hard to find. They can be very American, and it really prompted me to use my library more. And I was concerned, I guess, that that's not promoted more in the local libraries around me, that they have some great collections and they should be used, but they kind of just sit there.
Yeah, it definitely does happen. Go ahead, Matthew. Sorry.
Just the other thing I want to mention about comics placed within academia is that you have more people producing non-traditional academic output now. And so you have students and researchers and faculty members making comics as the output of their research. And so you want to have comics there so that you can have them as examples. So you can say, this is what you can make. And also resources for how to make comics as well are a really important thing to have in that. And that is also for public libraries, is how to make comics. If people are going to be excited about these and people are going to want to make their own.
I think even just go ahead, Yuji. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's, here in Australia, for example, there's a comic book creator, Bruce Mountard, who lived in Melbourne but now lives in Perth, and he's published a few graphic novels. And in the last 2-3 years, he's been working on a PhD thesis, and he presented, and it's about comics, and he presented his thesis as a comic. So. There's some really interesting work there, which I would never have expected. What can you actually do, like a whole thesis and present it as a comic? He did, and I haven't read the whole thing. I've seen bits and pieces that he posted in Facebook here and there when he was working on it, and I thought it was amazing, absolutely fascinating. And as I said to him, once it's all finished, and I think he was about to finish it soon. Once it's all finished, I would love to read it. I would love to read that. So, yeah.
There's a chapter in comics and critical librarianship about making comics as class assignments and how libraries can help support that as well.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah, kind of what you were saying too, Matthew, in terms of supporting academic educators. On the public library side of things, we see it a lot too in terms of K through 12 educators not being familiar with how to use comics in the classroom, coming to us for Reader's Advisory to see what they can introduce into their class. And really, I think just in general, comics are a great way just to promote the library and giving access to a reading community that is somewhat, I guess, underserved. I had the opportunity before the pandemic to go to Michigan State University's Comics Forum, which was a really great opportunity in terms of seeing scholars present on their work. They had a artist alley and things like that, a keynote from Emil Ferris, and just the amount of people that came to that event. It's, in public libraries, we see the same thing. When a library might try to organize a Comic-Con or Comic Arts Festival, it attracts people and gets people using the library that might not otherwise, approach the library. Irgi's nodding his head.
Yeah, we were actually at my library. We were organizing our first Comic-Con this year, and it was going to be in July. And of course, now it's postponed until who knows when. And so all the work that we did, reaching out to different creators and community groups and things like that. Then we had to call them all and say, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but given the situation, it's postponed. We'll, hopefully it will happen later in the year, but we don't know." That was heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, I had to do the same thing. But my library was planning our first for September, and we just decided to cancel it outright. Just even if we're back or things are improved, we didn't anticipate that that's something that people would want to be doing. I was getting emails from artists saying that they were clearing their schedules for the year regardless, and our applications closed, and maybe 2 or 3 days later, I was sending emails saying, "Thank you, but sorry." But that is what it is. So there obviously still is an opportunity to reach people, virtually. Obviously, like a panel that we're doing here on the public library side of things. I mean, resources like Hoopla make comics still at least available digitally. Is there any like Australian equivalent to digital distribution for libraries and comics?
So the main ones that I used here, so RB Digital.
Mm-hmm.
So RB Digital and Overdrive would be the main ones. That would be the main ones that our libraries use here. I'm sure I'm leaving one, but yeah, those are the main ones that I've seen. Yeah.
Okay. It's unfortunate that academic libraries don't really have access to any of the digital comics. Yeah. Hopefully, at some point in the future, someone will work out how to do that.
Well, and that brings up webcomics too, which is, I think, a gap that we kind of miss, certainly on the public library side. I mean, there's almost nothing there. I'm not sure, Matthew, if you can speak to webcomics and academic libraries.
Sure. That's actually one area where academic libraries are able to do something with digital comics. There is let me get the exact name of this right now. It's the Ivy Plus digital comic collection thing. Let me see if I can find it. I cannot find it right now. Okay, the Global Webcomics Archive, done by Ivy Plus, and Ivy Plus is a consortium of academic libraries within the USA. And so this is an archive of webcomics. The comics, it's like archive.org, if you've ever used the Wayback Machine like that. So it's a collection of webcomics and information about them, just in case, because everything on the internet is not there forever. And so this is creating a collection of webcomics that if people in the future want to do research with them or look at them and see what was happening, they can go back and find these and have them all located in one place. It's not every webcomic, or at least not yet, but it is a whole bunch of them. And so that's one thing that academic libraries have been able to do with webcomics. I think what you said is very true. It's very hard for libraries to promote or support webcomics in a lot of ways until they're in physical editions available through library distributors, which often doesn't happen. If a book goes to like Kickstarter or something, libraries probably can't buy it, unfortunately. But I would like to see more things done with libraries promoting webcomics. We've talked within the Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable about doing a similar list to the best graphic novels for adults list, doing a best webcomics list as well. Which I think it would be a really exciting opportunity to help highlight webcomics from the library side of things.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good idea. I like it. Yeah, at ALIA Graphic, I guess one of the things that we've done as well, and we've done it just recently as well. Now that we're putting everything online and all that, and mind you, I have to say we're a newly formed group. Like we've only been in existence for 2 months, so we're babies. We're still babies. But yeah, well, one of the things that we've done is we've compiled a list of Australian and New Zealand webcomics. Some of them are still current and still being updated. Some of them are already completed. But we've compiled that list and we've put it in on our blog. And we've put it there also. Obviously know that libraries are closed. You can read this. You can also use the digital platforms like RB Digital and Overdrive and all that. And we've also put like some resources and activities for learning at home. And of course, we've put the link there for all the webcomics as well. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that maybe the public library is not great at promoting webcomics, but maybe we can do as ALIA Graphic, and the same with the Roundtable. So yeah, that's great.
I agree. We are having our final coming up soon, and we're trying to push out things for students to, again, use as a stress relief, and I've been pushing Webtoons. It has all these different kinds of comics all put together in one place. My favorite's Lore Olympus. If you guys have never read it, it is great.
I've read some of it.
There's a there's a great and Webtoons too. I mean, and webcomics in general, I think do a great job of just responding to current situations. There's a great series on social distancing, I think by Beth Barnett. Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up right now. Just commenting on current situations as opposed to the slower process of issuing a print comic or graphic novel. So there's definitely ways to comment on current events in webcomics that traditional print can't.
Yeah, the Nib is a website that has a lot of really great political comics, especially right now about the entire pandemic situation and things surrounding it.
Yeah, and now with the pandemic, it's been great as well. There've been a lot of graphic medicine webcomics that have come out, dealing with social isolation, the pandemic, and all this, and some educational ones as well, and things like that. So, yeah, there's been some really good work produced in that sense. Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's touch on the pandemic. So, how are any of you serving the communities that you served during this time? Is there anything like comic specific to that? And really just how you're participating with the Libcomix community?
We, at our library, we've ramped up our online services in general, ask librarians, support for students, things like that. We're moving a lot of things online, like we've started doing book groups and online film club and things like that. In terms of comics, as I said, we were organizing the Comic-Con. That's been postponed. We'll see if we can get maybe some creators to do like a chat or workshop or something, but through digital means. And at my library, we actually didn't really have any digital graphic novels. So it was very much all just ebooks. So now we're actually looking into it, and we want to get digital graphic novels. I think that was kind of like we were kind of delaying, or, and now we want to catch up on that. So that's at my end. Maybe Sarah can talk a little bit about what we've done in these 2 months as ALIA Graphic.
Yeah, because I have free time now. I was volunteering at a library that stopped. My studies have stopped. I work for my my money earning job in a supermarket. So that has been a big life changer for me at the moment, and that's been my focus. As well as the ALIA Graphic. So I'm not in libraries, I'm not studying currently, but I found that I can put my focus into that. Yugi mentioned we've done the blog posts with the digital content. We've got a list of activities and resources posted by creators. And we're also doing the YouTube posts. So we've got the creator chats, which we've got a few of them up. And we're going to be doing some more conversations with librarians as well. And as much as I can contribute at the moment, but it's nice to still have a place in this unprecedented times.
I don't have a job right now. Yeah, I don't have a job right now, but what I'm working on for the Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable is a comics and graphic novel focused Wikipedia edit-a-thon. So often these are things that are hosted in academic libraries or edit-a-thons where you're, aiming at teaching people how to edit Wikipedia and also helping them create, citations and things in specific types of articles. And right now it seems like a great time to do it at home as well. So hopefully in the next couple months, you'll be hearing more about this, and we'll be streaming some instructional information about how to edit Wikipedia, and then having some, specific things like, hey, here are some people that, these articles about comics things need citations, or, here are some people that don't have articles that could get articles that would be really great. And just honestly, a lot of the time, these Wikipedia edit-a-thons are about highlighting women and members of marginalized groups who are underrepresented on Wikipedia. So I think any comics-focused Wikipedia edit-a-thon that we're doing will also be aiming at increasing the number of articles and the length of articles about members of marginalized groups on Wikipedia that make comics.
Awesome. I know one thing. I was in the middle of a grant-funded project where we were meeting with 6th through 8th graders after school to do a comic book club discussion group. And we're using the grant funds to actually purchase books for the students. And as when the pandemic started and we had stay-at-home orders, I think 3 meetings left to do. So we've kind of transitioned those to Zoom. So, it can be challenging meeting with 6th to 8th graders in person, and now wrangling them online is a new experience. And I'm not a teacher, so that has been interesting. It's unfortunate though too, because a lot of the books that we bought, at least I think 2 sets of copies that they voted on and selected, we ordered, they came in, and they're now sitting in our library unable to be distributed to them. So I have no idea. They're done for school for the year. We'll figure out what to do with those copies when we go back, I guess. But luckily we have things like Hoopla to distribute comics digitally. So that's one thing I've been doing. I have my last meeting with them next week. So it's unfortunate that that's had to kind of transition to online and not have that in-person experience. What about you, Kristin? Anything that you're working on?
As for me, my library, we've been working from home since the middle of May. So I've been doing a lot of online chats, and I help with interlibrary loans and things like that. But as for comics, I did a LibGuide against stress relief for our students, and I did include a section on there about digital comics and places where they can find them, in addition to all sorts of other things they can play with online.
Absolutely. I just want to highlight real quickly, some people have dropped in the chat some links to some of the things that we've discussed. And really, if anyone has any questions too, I'm taking a look at the chat. Please feel free to drop them in there as well. I know our own, the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable Resources Committee has been working on a bunch of online resources as well. Reading comics at home, and obviously this panel that we're doing in a series of programs that have been online over the past several weeks. So that's one thing that's happening in our community online. Someone asked about the Wikipedia edit-a-thon, if there's a specific place that they can go to follow updates on that.
It'll be
posted
on
to the GNCRT.
Yeah, it'll be on the GNCRT social media pages. More information when that comes out.
Perfect. All right, let's go back to, we kind of touched on collection development a little bit, but does anyone have like tips and practices for collection development, how they find and evaluate titles, even if libraries should have specific policies in regards to collecting graphic novels?
You should have collection development policies, because you never know when somebody's going to try to challenge one of those. And getting into the whole intellectual freedom thing, which I'm on that roundtable too. Yay. Yeah, you definitely need like a really solid development policy there. And yeah, as for going around and trying to find comics, I usually hit up at the comic book store, which I haven't been able to go to for a really long time, and I'm kind of getting withdrawals. But yeah, I follow that, and I follow a bunch of lists that are emailed to me, and I've been following them for so long, I actually don't remember where I found them, so I can't really share them. They just come to me.
For academic libraries, I think that collection development policies are incredibly important to have. I think really, for academic libraries, you want to be targeting specific collections. You don't just want to say, oh, we're getting comics, unless you have a comic studies department, and then it's probably okay. But if you're collecting graphic medicine collection comics, or if you're collecting comics to support educational resource or science resource or whatever it is, putting it in the collection development policy is really important. And the second reason, in addition to like justifying it to people that might complain, is if it's just you doing it, get it in the collection development policy. So if you leave to go to another job, someone else has to do it after you, and it doesn't just stop. I think quite often still comics ordering and everything to do with comics ends up just being something that one individual does.
Yeah.
And so when you're putting it into policies, you're like, okay, this isn't just me. Someone else has to do this too. Someone else has to learn about this, so that it doesn't just end if I go somewhere else with another job, or if I retire, or whatever it happens to be. I'm not going to retire anytime soon. Theoretical.
Yeah, I think for me, like at the public library, similar to what's been said, the collection development policy, it's incredibly important. And I think there tend to be two tendencies, at least here in Australia. One tendency is to kind of have a general collection development policy that kind of applies to all collections. So you kind of write the policies, and the same kind of things kind of apply pretty much to all the collections. And the other document seems to be like, or the other style seems to be like, this is what we do for picture books, this is what we do for graphic novels, this is what we do for DVDs, etc. And what I've noticed is that whenever it's in those different sections, graphic novels are usually non-existent, or they're only mentioned in the in the junior fiction, but just in passing, and they're mentioned in adult fiction, and very often with this kind of warning of, but be careful, because these they can be very graphic and they can be very violent kind of thing. And so, because I did quite a bit of research and looked at a lot of these documents from different public libraries, and so that needs to be changed. So I think that if you're going to have each section, each collection outlined in that document, you need to make sure that graphic novels are there too. They have their own section. You have audiobooks, you have DVDs, you have picture books, and you have graphic novels, their own section. And make sure that that's written by someone who understands the medium and respects the medium, not just as a warning of, they can be graphic and violent. Come on, that's not helpful. And then, yes, it's important to have that document so that if there's any challenge, you can respond to it. But very much the same way as you do with every other, And in terms of how I find comics, I think, that's a little bit of a dark alchemy, because there's so much being published all the time, and it's impossible to find everything and troll through everything. But yeah, I look at previews, reviews, talk to local comic stores. I check Giles's list, for the teen graphic novels. There's also a UK comic book critic that I really like called Paul Gravett. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure about his surname. It's GravetT.
Mm-hmm.
And he publishes every month. He publishes like a selection of graphic novels that upcoming graphic novels that he thinks are really interesting. So I always look at that because he's a cool guy. Talk to comic book fans, things like that. So I just try to collate all those things. And I think because of that, at the ALIA Graphic, we've started doing a monthly roundup as well that collects kind of, what we see are the important things. And maybe Sarah can talk a little bit about the monthly roundups if you want.
Yeah.
Oh, you're always so nice. Yes, so we have the monthly roundup. We've got a few people contributing to it. It's not perfect, and there is a lot that we probably miss. We try and focus on Australian titles to make sure we catch them, and we aim for about 20 titles, mainly so they can be used from a librarian as a starting point to look at what they've missed or what they can add to their collection. And it's really a resource to help them out, especially someone that is looking to build the collection or isn't sure what to get. And yeah, we divide it into, we've got adult, and then we divide it into junior and young adult. And that's mainly just for an ease of people to look at the titles. Yurugi would change it completely if we could, but yeah.
This is a good segue. Matthew in the Q&A has a question about if there are any major Australian creators or comic series that we in the US should be keeping an eye out for.
Well, the most famous Australian creator is Tom Taylor, and the best-selling creator. So, most famously, he's done, I guess, Injustice and Deceased. He specializes, actually, he specializes now. He can do pretty much anything because the all-new Wolverine that he did is more kind of a character series and is excellent. I loved it. But he's also really good at big, massive series with a huge number of characters and huge, massive events and things like that. So he's actually, he's really good at pretty much everything he touches, because he's also done some junior graphic novels with The Deep that were excellent. My kid absolutely loves them. And so, he is probably the most popular. But there are quite a few others. I would like to mention, for example, we've got a little cluster actually. 3 creators that publish with Top Shelf, and all 3 of them have a new graphic novel coming out this year. So we've got Campbell White, who published Home Time a couple of years ago, and he's publishing Home Time Book 2 this year, and that's which is actually the conclusion. So it finishes the story. We've got Chris Gush, who published his first graphic novel with Top Shelf, and that was a couple of years ago as well, and that was called Bottled. And the second one is Under Earth, and it's going to be published sometime this year. I can't be sure exactly when, but and the third one is Pat Grant, who is publishing The Grot. And The Grot has been actually published as a webcomic, and as soon as it's finished this year, it's going to be published as well. So the other really popular one is actually a junior creator, Aaron Blaby, and his Bad Guys series has been very, very popular. It's been in the New York Times best-selling list for a very long time. And I guess another couple of things that I would like to mention. Witchy by Ariel Slamet Reyes. I'm not sure actually how to pronounce her name, but Witchy was published by Lion Forge, and again it was a webcomic, and then it was collected in one volume, and she's still publishing the series as a webcomic, so it's still ongoing. And the other one is Super Sidekicks, which here in Australia is published by Penguin Books. And I know it's been published in the US, but I'm not sure about the US publisher. So Super Sidekicks, it's pretty much like for the same people that like Dogman, like Bad Guys that I mentioned before. So it's essentially, you know, the sidekicks kind of getting sick and tired of how badly the superheroes treat them, and deciding that they're gonna form a group, a superhero group by themselves, and they're called the Super Sidekicks. And it's really, really fun for kids. And the third book is being published right now in Australia. I think in the US it will be published soon, but I don't know exactly when. I don't have the dates in front of me. So yeah, there are quite a few. The thing here in Australia is there's no really comics industry, you know. So a lot of the creators publish books here independently, and they're not necessarily published in the UK or in the US. And the ones that are published, you know, they usually find a deal with some US publisher kind of thing. Oh, another one is Fence, which is a great series, and I absolutely love. And so C.S. Packard lives here in Melbourne. Yeah, that series is awesome. Really fun.
The one,
awesome. Sarah, good.
Sorry, the one very adult Australian comic that I will mention is Oglaff at oglaff.com, which is like a fantasy comedy erotica. It's funny smut. It's great. If there's print copies you can get for your library, you should do that. But I think it was only released through like a crowdfunding campaign.
Sarah, did you have any Australian comics that we should be aware of to add?
No, I mean, Yogi touched on most of them. The only other one that I am a huge fan of is by an artist called Trace Barla.
Yep.
She has 2 books out. She's got a third one that's just been released lately, and her titles are Rock Hopping and River Time. And they're in the junior graphic novels, and they're one of the books that I borrowed for my daughter, and she loved them. They're very Australian. They're all about a character that goes on a trip down the river, and so it has a lot of Indigenous culture in it. It has a lot of reference to it. It's a rich, you think of being out in the bush in the summer, and that's one that I'm very fond of and really promote to parents because it's something that they can read, but there's enough in the pages for the children to look at. It's a really great series.
And can I just mention a couple more? Sorry, just to finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so we also have Simon Hanselman, who is from Tasmania, and he publishes with Fantagraphics, and he's published a lot of comics with them, especially the Mega Hex kind of comics. So, you know, very kind of psychedelic, good stuff. And the other one, going all the way down to Junior again, there's a great series, and I'm not sure if it's published in the US, but you can probably get it. Look into it. For really early readers, you know, it was actually the first comic that I gave to my son, and he absolutely loved it, and he still reads it every now and then. He gets it out and reads it again. It's Adventures of Anders by Gregory Mackay. A really beautiful, really sweet, innocent book that is just really fun. It's just kids going on an adventure with a little bit of fantasy, and it's really, really sweet and beautiful. And for early readers, you know, it's really cute and it doesn't have too much text. And yeah, but he's 9 years old now and he still reads it and still loves it. So yeah.
All this discussion of Australia comics has reminded me of one other area where it can be really good to have collection development policies in libraries is for locally produced stuff. And so if you have a local collection, if you're getting, you know, books and things by people that are local to your city or your state or your province or country or whatever it happens to be, comics are a great thing to add to that policy. And then going to the local events, if you have local Comic-Cons when they happen, getting them in those places is a really great way to build up that collection and make connections with local artists who you can bring in and have do workshops and stuff as well. It becomes an act of building community and growing a community as well as just a collection.
Yeah, even just talking to a local comic shop, especially in public libraries, I'm surprised at how little public librarians kind of approach their local comic shop in terms of helping with collection development. Because I mean, if you don't have a librarian who's expert, you know, they are the experts. You know, even, you know, if you have the ability to buy your comics and graphic novels from them, I think that can go a long way, as opposed to, you know, the large library vendors where we tend to get most of our materials.
Yeah, and for me, I've always said that like every library needs a graphic novels champion, but if you don't have one, talk to your local comic store, you know. And even if you have one, it's always a good idea to talk to your local comic store. But if you don't have one, you definitely should be talking to your local comic store. And just to finish on the Australian comics, yeah, we are very aware that here there is not an industry, that a lot of creators are actually living here but publishing in the US. Like, actually, I didn't even realize that C.S. Packet was from Melbourne, you know, for quite a long time until someone mentioned it. Yeah, she actually lives here in Melbourne. Oh, okay, so Fans is actually an Australian comic, even though it's published in the US. I didn't realize. So because of that, and because very often they go kind of under the radar, we started at the end of the year, we published on our blog, even before we were officially a group, we published an Australian roundup of the best comics from last year, from Australia and Australian creators. And so hopefully that's something that we can do you know, every year. It's not a comprehensive list of everything that was published in that year in Australia or by Australian creators, but it's, again, it's kind of like a roundup of, you know, some of the highlights. Yeah.
I wish we had that here in Canada.
There's an idea for you and Amy to work on.
Just keep an eye on time. We have about 7 minutes left. There's one more question I want to get to. For people currently in library school, or even library workers who aren't necessarily librarians, you know, what advice do we have that for them, and what terms of what they can do to connect comics in libraries? And Sarah, this might be a good question for you to start with, since you're currently in library school.
Yeah. Prior to last year, I didn't really connect comics with libraries as much. You know, I've read comics all my life. It just never occurred to me to go to the library or to even apply it to my studies. And that's changed now. But the biggest thing I think for students is to find a group, a national group like ALIA or ALA Roundtable, and connect with them and volunteers who have knowledge, who have resources, and who can really mentor you and help you to be involved. And from their point of view, they just want enthusiasm and people that are willing to help. And that's the best you could do. The other thing is to use your local library and academic library where you're studying and borrow the titles and engage with them. My local library encourage patrons to leave reviews. So that's something that I have done, and also questions that will help build their collection as well, and to really connect and be involved and engage with it, and don't think that because you're not in a library role or you don't have the experience, you can't contribute, because you can.
I think it's a great way too to get that experience. I became involved with our roundtable as a student, and I think our roundtable is maybe a little bit different in terms of how receptive it is to student involvement, which maybe isn't always true with other ALA roundtables. But being involved and just stepping in, volunteering, kind of led me down a rabbit hole, connecting to different librarians on Twitter and seeing what other people are doing, and kind of realizing that this is a path that I could take, in my career and become involved in something that I'm interested in. So yeah, I agree. Just putting yourself out there in terms of, joining the roundtable or the ALIA group in Australia. Anyone else have something that I'd add for what students could do?
Your assignments about comics. If you have a collection development assignment, if you have a cataloging assignment, if you have anything like that, do it about comics.
I like what he said there, and that's actually part of what I did. So when I was talking before about the collection development policies and all that, that was an assignment that I had to do, collection development policies, public libraries, when I was doing the course. And I thought, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it about how they represent graphic novels in these documents. And that was an interesting assignment. The other thing is, pretty much what's been said already. But when I started working at the library, it was for finding the roundtable and joining the Facebook group and lurking around, and every now and then commenting there a little bit. Got me started. I started contacting different people. Then suddenly one day, Tina Coleman contacted me, and she was like, "Hey, you're from Australia and you're really interested in comics. And what's happening?" And then we started talking, and so that was my first connection, and that was probably about 2 years ago. And then on the other hand, I contacted with a librarian from Sydney who's done some amazing work in terms of comics and libraries. And she's a collections coordinator for Inner West Sydney Libraries. And so, that's how I started kind of making contacts and talking about these things. And that kind of led to me putting the submission and, to form this group. So I would never have thought that it would happen like this, but it led me down this path. And I think, we're a newly formed group, for example, here in Australia. So we really need, we're still building our team. So we need people to volunteer. And, I don't mind whether that's a new graduate, whether that's a student or a really experienced librarian. We all contribute, with our knowledge, with our experience, and with our enthusiasm, So definitely we need people.
And I think the odds are too, we kind of touched on this earlier, that, if the library doesn't have a graphic novel expert, I think that's a marketable skill that you have as you look for your career, that, here's an area of expertise and something that you can bring to the job. I know I've had that experience myself in job interviews, and just you bring something different. I think that not a lot of people bring to this profession.
You can also volunteer if your library is having a Comic-Con, or if there's a Comic-Con in your area. I know ALA always has with the Graphic Novel Roundtable around here, has a booth at C2E2 that I volunteered at, and I've been volunteering there since before I was a librarian. So that's a good place to start too.
Okay. Well, we're at the hour just about. Does anyone have anything else that they want to add before we go?
Follow me on social media and ask me more questions. If you have more questions, feel free to get in touch by social media or email or anything like that.
I think that's probably true for all of us. Yeah. And if you've read a great graphic novel for adults, nominate it for the best graphic novel for adults reading list.
Yep.
That link's been put in the chat. But yeah, if we don't have anything else to add, thanks for everyone for attending the panel. Stay safe and healthy. And thanks. This was a lot of fun. This made life feel a little bit more normal for at least this hour.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Yep.
Thank
bye.
you.